The focus is now on whether the US and Iran can resume talks to end the conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz to alleviate energy supply concerns. Analysts say the rise in Asian equities may signal investors have priced in the worst case of the impact from the crisis, and that if a deal materializes, oil prices could settle from current levels.
So I think what we'll see is more of an oil price that's probably in the 70s, maybe depending on what's happening geopolitically, it could pop up into the 80s. But I'm hoping the days of $100 oil are behind us at this point in time.
For now, Asian markets are holding cautiously, but with no clear path to a peace deal, any shift in the conflict could trigger more volatility across the region and add pressure to governments grappling with energy supply concerns. Patrick Falk, Al Jazeera, Singapore.
Okay, we're going to take a look at some of the day's other news now. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has admitted he made a mistake when he appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. In a statement to the House of Commons, Starmer said he would not have appointed him had he known Mandelson had failed security checks. He's answering some questions in the House at the moment. Let's listen in.
And it remains my strong view that the recommendation of UK SV could and should have been shared with me, and could have and should have been shared with the Foreign Secretary, and thus with the Select Committee, and it should have been.
John Drew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to the question raised by my right honourable friend, the member for Hartsware, Mr. Speaker, is it not pretty poor form that the Prime Minister shovels the blame for this, particularly onto Ollie Robbins, a fine and experienced civil servant who was appointed 2 days after the Prime Minister's Mandelson announcement? Surely, Mr. Speaker, the buck stops at the top.
Prime Minister. Can I say again, Sir Ollie Robbins has had a distinguished career, and I've worked with him over a number of years. Nonetheless, he could and should have shared this crucially relevant information with me before Peter Mandelson took up his post, and he should have done at various points after that. And it was because of that that I lost confidence in him. That doesn't mean he hasn't got a distinguished career. He does have a distinguished career.
We're going to speak to Jonah Hull. He's in London following the story for us. Keir Starmer, they're pretty much placing the blame firmly on the civil servants. We should just point out the Ollie Robbins he's talking about is Sir Ollie Robbins, the top civil servant at the UK Foreign Office, who was sacked as a result of this. But it does, as I say, seem fairly clear where at least Keir Starmer believes the blame should lie.
Yes, very much so. That has been the strategy of Number 10 and the Prime Minister, to blame all of this on the civil service. We will hear, indeed, on Tuesday from Ollie Robbins, now former head of the civil service in the Foreign Office, as to his side of events, why it was that he took the decision in the first place to overturn the recommendation that Peter Mandelson shouldn't be given security clearance, but then to go on from that and keep that information from the Prime Minister and the government, allegedly under the terms of legislation that govern the functioning of the civil service. Look, Keir Starmer, about an hour ago now, made his statement to an absolutely packed House of Commons. He looked pretty chipper going in. He sounded pretty confident. I think he will feel that he has achieved what he set out to achieve, which was to refute any suggestion that at any point over this affair he misled the House of Commons and MPs, that he lied to them. Had he done so and been shown to do so, that would be something that would require the Prime Minister to resign. Instead, he set out in meticulous detail the timeline around the appointment of Peter Mandelson, this disgraced former Labour cabinet minister, scandal-prone, who Starmer and his advisers thought would be well placed to deal with the incoming Trump administration. Vetting of him, security vetting of his appointment, happened only after the appointment was announced. There was a lot of criticism about that. He said that was perfectly usual at the time under the law, which he has since changed. It was a job that was conditional on security vetting, which he was assured by civil servants had in fact been granted through due process. That, of course, last Tuesday turned out not to be the case. As we now know, he was recommended against clearance. That was overruled by civil servants and kept from the Prime Minister. These were the key words. He described the whole thing as unforgivable and incredible. This information, he said, is something that I and this House should have had a long time ago, that I and this House had a right to know. And let me be clear, he said, had I known, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment. And in those words is this implicit suggestion. He didn't address misleading the House directly, but that had there been any misleading on the Prime Minister's part, it was entirely inadvertent. He simply didn't know.
Yeah, Jenna, we're going to find out in the coming days whether or not Keir Starmer has been able to convince the House that he did not mislead them. Jonah Hull, thank you very much indeed. Ukrainian authorities say its military hit an oil refinery on Russia's southern coast, killing at least one person. A fire broke out at the Tuapse seaports, where one of Russia's key Black Sea export facilities is housed. Ukraine's military drone, Forces Commander, said it struck the refinery for a second time this week. Audra McAlpine's in Kyiv with more on what Ukraine's been saying about the attack.
We did hear from Ukraine's General Staff of the Armed Forces regarding an attack on the same oil refinery on April 16th, which they did claim responsibility for. This is, in their words, an effort to disrupt Moscow's war funding. We know that European partners have personally asked Zelensky to scale back his attacks on Russian oil exports. Now, Zelensky did not specify exactly which European countries that those were, but said that he was waiting for sanctions on Russian oil to be fully reimposed as they were before. That was his answer to those requests. As we know that those sanctions have not been reimposed. In fact, the United States has extended that sanctions waiver until May the 16th, which allows oil already loaded onto ships to be sold. So Ukraine's actions may speak louder than its words here. While this sanctions waiver is in place, we see that Ukraine has continued to strike Russian oil exports.
Yulia Shapovalova has the latest update from Moscow.
One man was killed at a seaport, and another man was injured, and he's been taken to hospital now. So right now, a fire broke out once again at the port during that attack, and it damaged port facilities as well as civilian infrastructure. We know that 17 buildings were damaged, and authorities have cancelled classes at schools. The previous attack on the same port in Tuapse was last Thursday on April the 16th, and it was hit by a massive drone attack as well, and a huge fire broke out in the port, which was burning for several days. Firefighters managed to extinguish it several days later, and 2 people died back then, a 14-year-old girl and a young woman, and 7 other people were injured. So we know that Ukraine